Cops finally figured it out. This was an illegitimate party. And we got closed down, but by that time, we were all ready to get up the next day and play rugby. But we went through, by the time Sunday after, and by the way, on Sunday at 12 o'clock, the beer truck shows up on the field on Sunday. And I said, well, how many kegs we got left? 20? And he said, yup, let's drink it. And we went through 50 kegs of beer. Well, it's Marty Watts again, episode 9, America Talk It Up. And I'm with my good buddy, Wally Dragmeister. And in this segment, it's going to be a wild one. We're going to talk about something. I hope the audience will laugh at this story because you could not find a story, not out of Hollywood. Even Hollywood casting couldn't make this story even better. Okay.
All right, you got me ready to go. What is it, Marty?
So, talking about the virus and the social distancing, and when they had these riots and they walked down the streets. So, I was thinking about that today, and I go back to 1975. In second week in October, it's the High Desert Rugby Classic. And there's like 6 or 8 teams in the tournament. And if you know anything about the High Desert, it's been going on ever since the Balloon Fiesta started, I think in 1972. So it's as long as the Balloon Fiesta. And if you know anything about rugby, we always have a party on Saturday night. We have the rugby tournament on Saturday and Sunday, but the big thing is Saturday night, the big party. And I mean, we're talking about a rugby party. There's dancing, there's beer, there's everything you can think of.
That's not optional, by the way. That's a required. It's like in figure skating. That's the required figures. If you don't go to the rugby party, I don't think they let you play the next day. Is that right?
Yeah. So here's what happened. The year before at the High Desert, they had the party at the the American Legion Hall, and they got kicked out. And so about a week before, we thought we were going to go into one of these Catholic parish halls, but we couldn't get a place. So all of a sudden, we don't have a place for the big Saturday night party, the Big Bang. Well, at that time, the rugby guys, we had about 9 rugby guys living on 117 Columbia Southeast. Now, if you don't know where 117 Columbia, it's 2 blocks from the Frontier Restaurant. It's right across the street from Johnson Gym. And there's a gas station on the corner right there now. In the middle of the block is this house with 5 bedrooms and a big porch. And we decided that we were going to have a block party illegally. And
permit optional, right?
Well, I had Griffin Lewis forge the permit.
Oh,
and so the barriers that they had, these barriers over in Johnson Gym by the swimming pool, the indoor auditorium, the swimming pool. So we stole those things, took them out, and Saturday night we had this band called the Flies, and there was a shop down the street from the Frontier was a place called the Guitar Shop, and the guy name was David Polk and Dennis Graham, and they had this band called the Flies. They were like the hottest band, and so we made a deal. We told them you could play if we give you a couple kegs of beer. That's what they played for. And they played, the Rolling Stones, Jumping Jack Flash, and all those great songs for the Stones. And so we decided to have an illegal block party. And now I was in charge. I was like Otter in Animal House. I was the guy who was in charge of the party. And so I decided that we were going to have a pig roast. And so about 2 or 3 days, there's this guy named Larry Penwell, and he was the character Flaunder, in the movie Animal House. He was Dolphin. They called him Flaunder, And
yes.
So we told him to go get a pig and bring it in. We're going to have a pig roast in the backyard at 117 Columbia. Now, remember, most of the people lived on that street were students. There was an apartment complex behind us. So we told everybody we're having a block party so we didn't get in trouble, right? And then the buildings behind on the east side were office buildings. So we had it all figured out, and I even had a scout patrol that went to every girl's dorm and invite them to the party. And then I figured out there was something going on at Popejoy Hall there by Johnson Gym.
Yes.
So I told everybody to park in the parking lot like they were going to Popejoy. So the cops never got they didn't know what was going on. And so anyway, Larry Pinwell, so I told him to bring this pig. So he brings this pig on Friday. We're going to dig this big hole for the pig roast, right? He brings a live pig. And just like Dorfin and Animal House, right? Flounder, and I said, Larry, I wanted a dead pig. And so Larry goes into his pickup truck in the glove department, pulls out a .22 revolver, and just shot the pig right there. Oh, man. Right there in the middle of the street. It was like a big bang, an echo. And I looked around, and so we took that pig, and we dug this hole, and we started the pig process, And, and just to speed up the story, that night at the party, the one guy that would get the bullet in their meat, it was me.
Oh, that's good.
so this guy, and by the way, this Larry Pinwell ended up going to prison. I don't know what he's doing today, but he was a character, and he was on the rugby team. And so anyway,
well, that's a little like Animal House too. Yeah. Some of those guys went to prison, right?
They did.
Yeah.
So here I'm trying to figure out, and then the guy who played our prop on the team, that's a position in rugby, was Richard Matusi, and he owned Budweiser distributorship. I guess his dad bought him the distributorship when his dad died. So he was just he was playing rugby with the Aardvarks. Right. And the Aardvarks was the club. We had the University rugby team, and we had the Aardvarks. The Aardvarks started in '74. I'm one of the founding members of that team. And so anyway, he decided to give us 50 kegs of beer.
How many?
50 kegs. And so the rugby tournament was on a Saturday. We played all day Saturday at Johnson Field. So the game was right across the street.
Right.
I think we had Colorado State. We had the Denver Highlanders. We had a couple teams from Arizona, University of Mexico. We even had New Mexico Tech had a team, and El Paso. So it was a great tournament. And so anyway, all of a sudden, about 1 o'clock on Saturday, we're playing rugby, the beer truck shows up at Johnson Field, 12 spigots. It was a truck with 12 spigots. and the driver said, where did I bring the beer? And I said, well, we can't have it on the field. Oh, well, nobody's going to do anything. So we drive this beer truck up there by the swimming pool, and we started giving beer to everybody. and all of a sudden, from 12 o'clock to 5, we went through 30 kegs of beer. Now, remember, I had a scout patrol the night before telling them about the party.
Right.
And the word got out. Where the Kona dorm is right there. Everybody was there. Now, you think the cops, the school police, you think they would have shut this thing down, but nothing happened. This is 1975, right? This is back in the days when you could walk down the student union building smoking a joint. Nobody did anything.
Right.
They were afraid to even push you around back in the Vietnam protest days. So anyway, all of a sudden, we're running out of beer. So I go to Richard and I said, look, can we get some more beer? And he said, you know what, Marty? I've got this. They had this thing called Michelob malt liquor. It was old beer. And he said, I've got about 30 cases. I'll bring those, and you guys can drink that stuff. Yeah. And so this is how this party started. And so I had some boys put the barricades up on Columbia Street there, and we blocked off a party. We had the Flies, and can you imagine a band called the Flies?
Yeah, that's something.
And they played, the Doors, and I remember that one song, the Doobie Brothers, Taking It to the Streets. Remember that song?
Yes, absolutely.
Man, we started dancing all night, and we had the pig roast, and everybody was having a great time. And I figured that the cops were going to close this down, but we figured if we had to midnight, because most of the guys had to play rugby the next day. We had games the next day.
Right.
Can you imagine getting up? And so this party got so big. Now, I want to tell you, I don't think I've ever seen a block party so packed. And then all of a sudden, the Lobo football team shows up. They played Colorado State that day, and they just got off the airplane. They're there. And then all of a sudden, I see my professor in anthropology. He was there. My literature professor. And then one of the daughters of the regent, she was there getting crazy. And I mean, everybody and their cousins was at this party. But I figured that if we invited everybody, we weren't going to get in trouble, right? you know. Well, I do know one thing. The University of New Mexico rugby team, after this party, was on double secret probation. I mean, this thing went nuts. People were partying. At that time, I wasn't much of a drinker. I was an athlete, but I partaked a few beers. But it wasn't like I was more worried about playing the next day. We were in the semifinals, but our team got so wasted or so party out. When we got to Sunday, we could just barely get on the field, and we lost to the Denver Highlanders in the finals. But I'll tell you this. We had every girl on campus there. We were dancing all night, and it was a true block party. I've never seen anything like it, and I was just thinking about this. What if that was during the COVID virus days? If that happened today, no way this could ever happen today.
Well, Marty, just the logistics, I see you in a whole new light. I think since the planning of D-Day, there hasn't been more of an elaborate plan put together against bigger odds that turned out so well. So pretty cool. And
I knew if I had the professors showing up, they weren't going to tell the university. And then we had the daughter of the Board of Regents. She was there. As a matter of fact, in the movie Animal House, when the girl gets so drunk, and her father was the president of the university.
Yeah, exactly.
And they dumped her on the
front, yeah.
Well, that's what we did with this woman. This girl, her name was Carol. Her dad was the Board of Regents, and somebody had to take her home and dumped her there. I mean, she got a little out of control, I guess. But I remember there was a girl named Nancy Jordan from Hobbs, and I danced with her all night. I just loved dancing. It was fun, and it was the party, and I can't believe we got away with it. And then around midnight, the cops finally figured it out. This was an illegitimate party, and we got closed down. But by that time, we were all ready to get up the next day and play rugby. But we did. By the time Sunday after, and by the way, on Sunday at 12 o'clock, the beer truck shows up on the field on Sunday. And I said, well, how many kegs we got left? 20? And he said, yup, let's drink it. And we went through 50 kegs of beer. I mean, that was a lot of beer in those days.
That's a lot of beer in any day. So. And,
of course, we sang rugby songs. And then afterwards, we go down to, remember Ned's?
Yes.
So Kenny, I'm trying to remember Kenny's last name. Kenny, he was the owner of Ned's. So we had the post-game party there, and we cleaned that place out. But here's the thing that's really incredible. So that party went on to midnight, and we finally cleared everybody out. I mean, there was bodies all over the place, passed out. So I get up in the morning about 8 o'clock, and we're playing at 10 o'clock. And so I'm going to go have breakfast. So I walked down to the Frontier, and I walked in, and there's Dorothy Ranishak. You know Dorothy and Larry?
Yeah, yep.
You know Dorothy.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Now, that was when Dorothy was a young woman. This is 1975,
Yeah.
They bought the place, I think, in 1972 or 73. And so she's there, and she knew me back there. And she said, Marty, what happened last night? We're cleaned out. We have no tortillas. I said, what happened? He said, when you guys closed at 12, everybody went to Frontier. They opened up till like 2 in the morning.
Right.
Everybody would go there. I guess that they had too much, and they just ate. There was no food left. I said, we cleaned you guys out. She said, I can give you a couple of eggs. I said, okay. I said, give me a couple. They were even out of coffee.
Wow.
And so we cleaned them out. And then I said, Dorothy, you want to see a disaster zone? We got out of the Frontier, and we walked, it's a half a block. And she couldn't believe all the trash and stuff. And she said, you guys had a party? I said, yeah. She said, let's do this every year. And, Dorothy and Larry are the greatest restaurant owners. Your wife I know she loves it. They're great people.
They're great people, absolutely.
But that's how I first got to know Dorothy, Think about how hard that couple works. They're in their 70s now, but they went to work every day. They were hardworking people.
You know what? And what amazes me about is, they have several stores now. So they have the Golden Prides. They have the mothership there in Central. I go to a restaurant now and then, particularly theirs. I see Larry working all the time. So he's one of the, it's like there's a lot of people you could say is the hardest working man in America, but he's right up there. That's for sure.
So that was the High Desert in 1975, and we actually did. I just couldn't believe we went through so much beer and stuff. And then I was going to tell you what made rugby a great game. And is that you played the game hard all day against your opposition, but after the game was over, you got together and became your best friend.
Right.
And these guys I played against, they're still my best friends. And I always want high school teams to get together, have pizza and Gatorade, get together, social.
Right.
But they won't do it.
Yeah.
And rugby's the only game I can think of, Wally. Where else is there a game when the teams get done, they get together and party together or socialize together? Nowadays, the rugby guys are drinking health drinks after the game. They're not doing what we did. But, we had some great athletes. Timmy Gorin played for Colorado. He played in the Liberty Bowl for Eddie Crowder. We had some great athletes. And I was in it because of I wanted to play. But the socializing was good. At that time, it was like a substitute for a fraternity.
Yeah, absolutely. The fraternity of rugby is probably stronger than many regular social fraternities, don't you think?
Yeah, and so I was the otter. I put the whole thing together, and we had a guy named David Klavinsky and Ray Marone, who started the Aardvark team. We called him Ray the Italian Stallion Marone. He's Italian, but you know what that Italian stallion meant for him. Every girl loved this guy, but everybody had nicknames. My nickname in rugby was called the Watts line.
Okay, yeah.
Or what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the Watts line is long distance, right? Back in the old days.
That's when people used to buy the Watts line, and so that was my nickname. I was fairly fast in those days, but it was a lot of fun. And I'll never forget, all these girls showed up that night and just danced all night. One of my buddies, Mike Pettinuzzo, who played on the football team, and Bob Supergan, they all showed up for the party. We had all these football players. We had everybody. It got to the point, that was when Norm Ellenberg was the coach of the Lobos. So the following Tuesday, I'm down at Ned's getting a sandwich, and even Norm Ellenberg said, "Hey, I heard that you guys had a hell of a party." I said, "Norm, it got back to you." He said, "You should have called me." And Norm would have showed up, and he would have been there dancing. But it was just it had to be one of the greatest block parties, and we didn't have a permit. We had a fake permit. And we took those barricades, but can you imagine getting away with that today?
No, that's crazy. So anytime we started off with 30 kegs of beer, and we had to add 20 more. Pretty cool.
Anyway, that's
a great story, Marty.
So listen, I guess the theme of this story is don't have a block party because you're going to infect everybody now with this virus. But it was a great day, and I still think I've talked to people. I don't think we've had a party like that since 1975, second week in October. And if you were there, contact us to my website here. But it was a great party. So we got to wrap this up, Wally. But we want to stay tuned to the next segment. I've got Shelley Burt. We're going to talk about of all things, the Fellowship of Christian Athlete. I was a Christian. Believe it or not, I was. I was a guy that tried to walk the narrow line. Sometimes I went off the line. But I will tell you, we're going to talk about how important the FCA was in my life. And that's our next segment. I've got my good friend Shelley Burt. This is episode 9, segment 2, and I've known Shelley. I guess I go back probably 20-some years ago with you when I first met you. Mm-hmm. I knew about you. You were the president of the Lobo Club back in the late 80s?
Actually, 81, 82. I'm old.
And of course, we're going to talk about faith. And my experience with the Fellowship of Christian Athlete, how it changed my life in high school. And, of course, your experience with the FCA. But the thing about you, Shelley, God did not, when you were born, you were not dealt a full deck. You were born with a handicap. Am I right?
Well, I was 9 months old when I contracted polio. It was 1945. And I spent about the first 13 years of my life at that point in time, going through therapy and surgeries to recover what they could, to allow me to have the ability to be mobile and to get around and have somewhat of a normal life. And so, yes, I didn't have a normal start.
Yeah, God didn't give you a break. You started out in this world And what I admired you had to overcome a lot of obstacles to get where you are today. And then what people don't know, Shelley has a beautiful wife, he has family, you have grandkids, great son, and and you had to overcome, and the only way I believe you went through this is because your faith in the Lord.
Well, it is the only thing that got me through, and I think as you and I discussed the other day, we both have been in a place where we have been very faithful, but we've also fallen short at some point in times in our life. And I think it's a journey, and we've been on a journey, together. I mean, my daughter played rugby. You were obviously a rugby man.
That's right.
And
I've been to many rugby parties. I wouldn't say I ever got real drunk, but I drank some beer. But I'll tell you what, when it all comes down to it, I always came back to the Lord. My story with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, I was, I think, a sophomore at Sandia High School, and there was this girl in my neighborhood named Debbie Russell. She was a cheerleader. I had a kind of a crush on her, but we never dated. But she invited me to go to the First Baptist Church. And I noticed there was a lot of good-looking girls there going to the First Baptist Church. So she got me to go to the Baptist Church. And I was a Methodist, but we didn't go to church. By that time, we would go to church a couple times a month. I wasn't a regular. And definitely I wasn't reading the Bible. I wasn't a man of the Bible, for sure. And she got me going to Sunday school at this First Baptist Church down there on Central, I think, University. Mm-hmm. And I noticed one day they asked you to get saved by the Lord. They asked you to come up, and she kind of plotted me up there. You ought to go up there, Marty. And I rejected it. But one day, you're talking about the Holy Spirit. It just hit me. This is the day I'm going to accept the Lord in my life. And that was when I was a sophomore at Sandia High School. It did change my life. And then the following year, we started the first chapter of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Now, when I was in high school, I didn't go out with a lot of girls. I mean, I probably should have, but I didn't drink or smoke. I was an athlete. I was the athlete guy, but let me tell you, the FCA, we formed this chapter, and it was the first chapter we had at Sandia High School. Of course, you've been involved with Sandia for all these years, and it really changed my life. And I think what really changed my life is when we went up to Estes Park for the big summer camp, Oh,
yeah, sure.
And I remember Roger Staubach we had huddles, and Roger Staubach was in our huddle, Jerry Stovall, Howard Anderson, the world's strongest man. And it changed my life going up there. And it was a one-week camp full of sports, and we had prayer sessions, but it really changed my life. Now, what really was interesting, we had about 35 guys, all football players from different high schools. We all came together at this huddle. We all stayed in these cabins. And at the end of the session, we all we all got together and said, look, we're going to be playing each other this fall in football games. Whoever is the losing team, you go in the other person's locker room and have a prayer session, bring guys together. Well, that year, we only won 2 football games. So I went into a lot of these guys' locker rooms, and I remember these football coaches, they didn't want me in there. Here I am walking in with my Sandia football uniform, bringing the guys together for a prayer. Now, today they do it on the 50-yard line, right?
They do.
But in those days, we went into the locker room, and to this day, I'll be 68 years old here coming August. I still run across town. Every year there's somebody say, hey, I remember you going in our football locker room. Man, you had guts, And they don't remember me as a football player. They don't remember if I scored a touchdown or whatever. They just remember me going into the locker room conducting a prayer session. That's how powerful the fellowship, and these guys never forget it. And there was one guy from Valley named David Sims, and he just couldn't believe it. I think he's still around. I've seen him about 15 years ago, but that's how powerful the Fellowship of Christian Athletes was in my life. And sure, I've gone off the road many times, but it always brought me back. I remember that, hey, man, I'm going off the wrong path, but somehow the Lord and my faith with God brought me back. And maybe that was the same story with you.
Well, I think that we all have our own stories, and certainly there's people that influenced you in your lives. I think we all find a comfort zone being someplace where we're not necessarily comfortable because we're with somebody that we trust and care about. Sounds like you had the same thing go on with you, but with me it was trying, number one, to find something that I knew was there, and to help understand how the most important part of it was that I was his child, and that we are all his children, and that he wants us to do the right things and be the right person and be the best that we can be. And there's so many different ways that I have the opportunity of doing that in life, Marty. And the most important thing at this point in time, especially at this point in time, because everything is a struggle, is that we remember that we're all God's children, and that he only asked us to do two things. He said to, love the Lord with all your heart, with all your might. And the most important second thing is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do unto your neighbor as you would have your neighbor do unto you. And, it's such a proactive statement. And especially in this day and time, you can't have ifs, ands, or buts when you're working with God. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. You're either in, you're sold in, or you're just walking the line. And the most important thing is that to know that he loves you, and whatever's going on in your life, you can be forgiven.
I went through a lot of struggles in my lifetime, but God, I always came back. I do believe there's a Holy Spirit. I've seen it work with people. And boy, I've gone off the line. I've been a sinner. There's things I'm not proud of. But God, I always came back, and I accept the Lord as my Savior. And I never left me back that day when I was in high school as a sophomore. And I don't know if Debbie Russell's still alive. The last time I heard, she was running a mission down in Socorro, but I thank her a lot. She was the one that got me in there. And the Holy Spirit was working with her. And then, I have to admit, I've had my struggles, but I always came back. The character that I resemble, that I identify with in the Bible, there was this guy named Barnabas. You know who Barnabas is? Oh, yeah. As you know, Paul went out to preach to the Gentiles. And at that time, Paul was a Jewish guy, and he thought, well, I'm going to take the Christian faith and take it to the Gentile. Well, they got to this place in Greece called Antioch. And one of the guys that went with him was a guy named Barnabas. He was the encourager. And that's where I get my spirit, because I always felt like I encouraged people. I inspired people. I send you stuff on text and fire people up. But I feel like that's what the Lord asked me to do, to encourage people. Don't give up. Don't give up on your faith. We're going through a tough time with this virus. This is where we got to get stronger, and this is where we got to bring people together. And there's no doubt, I'm no perfect person, just like you and anybody else. But what keeps us up every day in the morning is the Lord and my faith. And I never lost it. I will admit it. There's times when I've asked questions, but I think a lot of us do. But I always come back. So I feel like I'm the Barnabas of the 21st century. I'm the guy that's encouraged people to go out there and make it happen.
Well, we all need a Barney, okay? We all need a Barnabas in our lives to make sure that we have someone to talk to go through the things that we feel like we've fallen short on, and to encourage us to look at it and know that we're forgiven, and that God's really got important things for us to do, and to not get caught up in Satan's work. It's such a privilege to be around people like you, and to be around people that I've had the privilege of being with through FCA. I know you, when my office was in place and you could see all those FCA balls signed by so many different people. I think the most fun thing that ever happened to me, we were having an FCA luncheon at Tanawan, and a gentleman by the name of Raymond Berry. You may remember that name.
Oh, he played for the Baltimore Colts.
And also caught all of Johnny Unitas's passes, but there's not many of us old enough to remember all that. But he was the guest speaker for FCA, came down out of Colorado, and it just so happened that Raymond Berry played at Southern Methodist when he played in college. And after he finished his speech, I made a beeline to the front dais to have a chance to say hello to him, and reached out with my hand, and I said, "Mr. Berry, my name is Shelley Burt." And he said, "Rose Bowl, 1936. And I said, "Yep, that was my dad." And so those SMU Mustangs, don't forget who their former players were either, because he and Doak Walker were great friends. I know you like history. I know you like talking about guys that made the game great. And I have a football that my dad got for me, signed by Kyle Rote and Doak Walker when they played for the Detroit Lions. And, just because I couldn't play, my dad never, ever thought that I didn't want to be close to it. And so, we had a wonderful time in life. We enjoy sports. We just enjoy them in different ways.
Well, your dad played in the Rose Bowl, and I think the only time SMU ever went to the Rose Bowl, right?
Actually, the only Southwest Conference team to go to the Rose Bowl. The next one that went was Texas in 2005, but it wasn't the Southwest Conference anymore.
My mother graduated from OU. My dad did too. But you know what? I never told you this story. When I was in high school, my mother, and my mom was a Methodist, and my uncle was the bishop of the Methodist Church of the Midwest Diocese. He was out of Omaha, and he went to SMU. He's the SMU guy, and my mother loved SMU. And my dad, and I don't know if I told you, my dad, when he graduated, he got a job as a journalist for Time Life magazine. And he did a story on SMU for Time Life magazine. So my mother remember going to the campus there in Highland Park, and she wanted me to go to SMU, and I applied at Sandy High School. My grades weren't good enough. I didn't have a high enough. That's how difficult it is to get. But one of the girls who was the cheerleader at Sandy, Diane Goen, she ended up going to SMU and got a master's. She just retired in the Albuquerque public school system as a counselor sociologist. But I'm so proud of her that she went to SMU. But my mother wanted me to be a Mustang. And I remember before Don Meredith died, I went up to see him. Believe it or not, I got up there and he sang that song Varsity. Remember that song they sang at halftime for SMU? So it was a great story. How much time we got left? A couple more minutes. We're going to go on to another segment about FCA, about what's going on. But I remember I wanted to go to SMU. I thought, and I remember my dad told me how beautiful Highland Park is, and it's a beautiful part of Dallas.
Oh yeah, well it's special, and it's more beautiful now. And by gosh, they're starting to play pretty good football again.
And of course, you went to Texas. The eyes of Texas upon you, and I hope they don't change that song because it's still one of the greatest fight songs of all time.
Well, you just things being what they are, people try to make something out of history that no one ever thinks about, but it fits their MO and what they want to talk about. And we have to have these conversations. We have to find a place to be able to communicate, and not just somebody telling someone what to do.
Well, and it comes about at the turn of the century. There was a minstrel, and they were in blackface, and they sang the song, and that's what they thought it was racial. But you're right. We got to have a dialogue. We just can't just. Now, I believe it would. I just found out just today that the State Fair of Texas is canceled for the year.
Really?
And you know how important that is for you and I.
That's OU weekend.
That's OU weekend, the OU Texas game. Yeah. And if people don't know, half of Texas is half of the state and half is OU, and that's a special game for you and I, it is, because of my parents and because of you. And one of the greatest things is when they sing that song, The Eyes of Texas Upon You, and half Oklahoma is listening. It's a great feeling. I mean, does it give you like bumps in you when they start singing that song?
Yeah, I don't care where you're from, you start singing.
and isn't there a line in that song as Gabriel the angel
blows his horn?
blows his horn. What's wrong with that song?
There's nothing wrong with that song.
Yep.
It's just somebody wanting to demand something that they feel has a concern.
So we're going to take a break here. We're going to come back in segment 3 and continue what's going on with the Fellowship of Christian. I want to get into what's going on nationwide, and Shelley's part of it. So we're going to break right now, and we'll be back for segment 3. Well, folks, welcome back to America Talk It Up, segment 3. I've got Shelley Burt. And Shelley, you've been in healthcare insurance business for how many years?
Since 1980, almost 40, well, I guess 40 years.
I mean, you've been very successful, but one of the things in your life is working with the FCA, and we're going to talk about what's going on with the Fellowship of Christian Athlete nationwide, and of course what's going on in New Mexico. Give us something. If people don't know anything about the Fellowship of Christian Athlete, give us a little history of how it all started and where it's going right now.
Well, you know what I'd rather do, and I'm gonna avoid some things. I mean, because it, number one, is a national organization. And the part that I want to talk about is just primarily Sandia High School here in town. And I will try to let people know that FCA does not have a national presence in New Mexico right now.
Wow.
But the good news is in September, we're going to have an area director for Albuquerque who's going to be available to us. We're also going to have an ambassador for the area, for the Albuquerque area, and have some presence that we haven't had for almost 10 years now. And it's just one of those things that happens when you have the right person. Monty Gavin, for years and years and years, ran the FCA here in New Mexico and did a great job with it. Monty and I, along with Jim Gray, John Biava, Jim Zanius, and so many other guys, really had a lot of fun doing FCA. And then as things would happen, new people came along and FCA changed its model a little bit, and they eliminated some positions in New Mexico. Because we're a small state and don't raise a lot of money, it got a little bit hard for them to look at New Mexico and say, how much money can we put there? And so part of what we're doing right now is looking forward to having an opportunity to bring support to these people that are going to be acting on a part-time basis on behalf of FCA. And it's just going to be really exciting to me. I'd like to, first of all, say that if anybody's interested, we'd love for you to go to fca.org, and you'd be able to go to a New Mexico tab, and you'd be able to see a little bit of what's going on at FCA and also New Mexico, but more importantly, have a chance to begin to participate financially with FCA so that we can begin to support these people. And again, it's not for their livelihood, it's for the basic expenses of what it takes to just keep a ministry like this going. I'm not on any official capacity. I was on an advisory committee 5 years ago. 20 years ago, I served on executive committees and other things, but you know, we go through those things in life. I happen to be probably the only person you knew that you could call today to have this conversation with, and I even checked in with FCA Regional to make sure they didn't mind me doing this with you, and they were happy to get it to see us get it done. At Sandia, we have for the last 6 or 7 years had an active what we call FCA, even though it's not officially FCA, and I don't want to get technical. We allow that to happen. It happens in many schools in Albuquerque. They were there before, and they continue to be there, even though we don't have a lot of leadership in the state going on. Kids want to have a safe place to go. And so what we've done, what I've tried to do, is be there for them and do things for them that they couldn't do for themselves, whether it was getting Bibles, whether it was buying reference material, whether it was bringing in speakers. We invited you to come speak here a couple of years ago, and I think that 20 minutes went by pretty fast.
So, if you're watching this podcast, my producer, director, Jimmy's going to have the website you can go to and a place where you can go donate money if you want to help out the cause.
That's correct.
Now, why it's important to bring these kids together. The one thing I always loved about rugby is after the game you play, you always got together with the guys and you socialize. It could be drinking a beer or drinking a Coke or having something to eat. Today's world in rugby, it's not like it was 20 years ago. The kids are now drinking health drinks after the rugby game. It's a different era, and that's good. That's good.
It is good.
Now, we've got people like Domino's Pizza here in town, and nationwide, they're willing to donate pizza to parties and stuff. I've got Gatorade and Pepsi. They're involved. Well, so one of the things I would like to do is get these people together. We need to have dialogue, and we need to talk about the Lord and talk about getting people to a safe area and talking about the issues. And we're with the Holy Spirit and the Lord helping him, it can go a long ways. And the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, we've got women athletes, male athletes. And right now, we need help to get this going here in New Mexico. Anybody that's out there that could go up to the website, I hope you see it up here. Please donate and help us. And, and there is probably a phone number, 800 phone number they could call.
There would be on the website itself at FCA.org.
Yes. So with that saying, I believe we've got to do something and bring these kids together. And the last time I was there, we had pizza and we had a social thing. And, another thing, when I was in high school, we had this thing called Young Life.
Right.
And we would get together at the Four Hills Country Club and sing songs.
It still exists.
Yeah,
and another great ministry for students. The most important thing is, and as we've been talking, everybody needs to be aware that things are changing.
Yes.
And so people are concerned about gatherings. In fact, our governor is probably very concerned about any kind of gathering, and whether it be 5 kids, 10 kids, somebody's house, we're probably not going to be at school like we have been for the last few years.
It's going to be a lot of online stuff. And Shelley, think about it. I believe that there's a lot of families that have single parents right now, especially in the minority areas of town and places where it's struggled, poverty. Poverty, it's not black, white, or green, or brown. It's poverty. And one parent's growing up, I can understand how tough it is. Now, if we can get those kids to get together and bring the Lord in their lives, because they need something. And there's big brothers, there's a lot of Christian brothers out there will adopt these kids and help them out. I know you're one of them, and I will too, and I know these kids need, some of them don't have fathers, some of them, their mother's working all day, some of them, the only meal they get is the meal they had at school. That's pretty bad. And so this is important, and we've got to bring these kids together, especially at the high school level where you're so vulnerable of getting in a gang or something could change your life. What's better that can change your life is getting the Lord in your life.
Well, again, we're trying to get a picture of what our schools are going to look like this fall. We're trying to get a picture of what we have one message that was brought to us today where a high school in Arizona has basically the principal said there will be no clubs. There's going to be nothing. And so, that kind of decision is one that you're going to see start to be more frequently part of the community and part of what's going on. So to try to continue to communicate, number one, safely in a different way. COVID is here. COVID is real. You don't want to not be aware that COVID is here. So parents are concerned, children are concerned, and how we can do things online, how we can effectively have Zoom meetings, how we can have different types of meetings so that we can be sure that kids are getting an opportunity to share, getting an opportunity to talk about their concerns, and getting an opportunity, more importantly, to open their Bibles and study. And so this is where our focus is right now, and it's very different.
How many kids out there who are being pressured by gangs or being pushed by drugs, they have nowhere to go. They need somebody to go to and talk to. And I've known many women and their children facing those problems. And I will tell you this, there's been a couple women in my life that helped me stay on that straight and narrow. One of them is a woman named Marianne Mathis, a woman named Susan Spear. There's been other women that in my life that came where I was struggling. They brought me back, and I, you know, if I forgive anything I ever did to them or said anything, I ask for their forgiveness because they saved me. They actually saved me, and they kept me on the line. But you're right. These kids are under a lot of pressure, and especially the ones who don't have a strong father or mother figure in their family. FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, can be a difference.
Well, and we're making a difference inside and outside all the problems that are going on. We have a director on the east side of the state who, for the last 3 years, has taken a busload of kids to now Flagstaff, where you went north for your summer week. They go to Flagstaff now. And they won't be doing that this summer because that's been called off to my understanding. But, the biggest issue, again, is so many things are being called off. And I don't think the decision makers are understanding the impact that is having on our children, on our ministries, on their isolation. I mean, it's not just those that don't have family support. I mean, there's a lot of families that have a lot of support around here. I saw a mother who went for a teacher meeting at the end of last year, and the teacher said, "Your child is falling behind."
Right.
And the mother said, "We are doing it remotely, and I am the teacher, and you're telling me I'm not doing a good job, and that's your job to do." So we're getting very confused in life right now as to how and who is responsible. And I just think there's just so many people that look rather superficially at what's going on and not giving us a chance to really make sure that we can stay social and stay vibrant.
So, Shelley, we got to wrap up here, but there's two things before we wrap up. Please go up to the FCA. What's the website?
FCA.org.
.org, and go up there. And if you need to help us out, we need some donations of money. And then the other thing I want you to know, if you like this podcast, go up and hit on Facebook like or follow, or go up to YouTube and hit subscribe. We're going to do more shows like this, but I think this segment's been very good. If you listen to this is really important for the kids. So I want to thank people for watching this segment, and I'll look forward in talking to you guys in our next episode number 10.